My mom won the lottery and secretly gave her golden child daughter $2 million while I got nothing. When she got sick 3 years later and my sister abandoned her, she expects me to be her live-in caretaker. Now she's shocked when I told her to ask her favorite for help. My sister Victoria has always been the golden child. 2 years older than me, she was everything our parents wanted in a daughter. Beautiful, charismatic, socially successful, she had that effortless charm that made everyone gravitate toward her. I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the practical child who got good grades and kept her head down, hoping to earn just a fraction of the attention Victoria received so freely. The favoritism started early. I remember being 8 years old, watching Victoria get ballet lessons, horseback riding, and private art tutoring, while my requests for music lessons were met with comments about being more practical with money. Yet when Victoria wanted her third horse, the money appeared magically. Family photo albums were filled with Victoria's dance recitals, competitions, and achievements. My academic awards barely warranted a spot on the refrigerator. As we grew older, the disparity only became more obvious. Victoria attended one of the most expensive private colleges in the state. When I asked about college funds, I was told to apply for scholarships and student loans. Victoria's wedding was a lavish affair with 200 guests and a destination to Bali. When I got married 5 years later, the budget was suddenly tight, and we had a modest backyard ceremony where I made my own decorations to save money. My parents, William and Catherine Mitchell, were successful enough to afford this favoritism. Dad ran a moderately successful real estate development business, and Mom had a corporate marketing position that provided steady income. They weren't wealthy by millionaire standards, but they were certainly comfortable enough to provide for both daughters equally if they chose to. I learned early on to be self-sufficient. While Victoria called home weekly asking for money to bail her out of various shopping sprees or spontaneous trips, I worked multiple jobs through college and graduate school. I put myself through my master's in social work, became a licensed therapist, and built a stable life with my husband Marcus. We bought a modest house, had 2 beautiful children, and created our own family traditions where love wasn't measured by material gifts. Victoria, on the other hand, maintained her lifestyle through my parents' endless support. Even after college, even after marriage to a successful lawyer, she continued to present financial emergencies that Mom and Dad always solved. She was the perpetual damsel in distress, whether it was a lost diamond earring, a failed business venture, or expensive home renovations that somehow always went over budget. The resentment I felt wasn't about the money itself, it was about what it represented. Every check written for Victoria's latest whim was a confirmation that I would never be enough in their eyes. Every time they chose her needs over mine was a reminder that no matter what I achieved on my own, I would always come second. Then, 3 years ago, everything changed in a way I never saw coming. My mother called me one morning with news that seemed impossible. She and Dad had won the lottery. Not a small prize, but the grand jackpot, $42 million after taxes. I remember feeling genuinely happy for them, thinking that finally, there might be enough resources for everyone, that maybe this windfall would even out the playing field between Victoria and me. I was wrong. The first hint that nothing would change came when they decided to keep the win relatively quiet. They swore me to secrecy, claiming they wanted to avoid the circus that often follows lottery winners. They said they had plans but needed time to work with financial advisors and lawyers to manage their newfound wealth responsibly. Over the next few months, I watched as my parents made some obvious upgrades to their lifestyle. They bought a larger house in a gated community, traded in their reliable sedans for luxury cars, and began traveling frequently. I was genuinely happy for them. They had worked hard their whole lives, and finally getting to enjoy their retirement seemed perfectly reasonable. What I didn't know was happening behind the scenes. Victoria, as always, had positioned herself as the central figure in their new financial reality. While I maintained my distance, visiting for holidays and calling weekly but never asking for money or special treatment, Victoria had insinuated herself as their primary beneficiary. The truth came to light during a family gathering about 6 months after their lottery win. My children were playing with their cousins, and I was helping Mom in the kitchen when Victoria casually mentioned redecorating her entire house. She laughed about how expensive the designer they hired was, but how worth it the renovation would be. Mom smiled and said something about how important it was to invest in quality. I agreed absent-mindedly while preparing a salad. Then Victoria dropped the bombshell with shocking casualness. She mentioned how grateful she was for the $2 million Mom and Dad had given her to make all these improvements possible. The knife I was using to slice tomatoes froze midair. $2 million. My throat constricted as I processed this information. My parents had given Victoria $2 million without mentioning anything to me. Not that I expected handouts or was even thinking about asking for money, but the deliberate secrecy stung worse than the disparity itself. I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom and tried to collect my thoughts. This wasn't even about the money anymore. It was about the fact that they could give such a significant amount to one daughter while keeping it completely hidden from the other. It was about being the only person in the room who didn't know about this massive family financial decision. When I returned to the kitchen, Mom seemed to sense my mood had shifted. She asked if I was feeling all right. I forced a smile and said I was fine, that I just needed to get home to finish preparations for the week ahead. I gathered my children, made polite goodbyes, and drove home with my mind racing. That night, after my children were asleep, I broke down in front of Marcus. He held me as I sobbed out all the years of feeling less than, invisible, unworthy. He suggested I talk to my parents directly, to clear the air and maybe understand their reasoning. Part of me knew he was right, but another part feared that confronting them would only make things worse, would only confirm my worst fears about my place in their hearts. I waited 2 weeks before saying anything. During that time, I played over different scenarios in my head, practiced what I would say, hoped they might bring it up first. They didn't. When I finally gathered the courage to call and ask to speak with them about something important, they invited me over for dinner the following weekend. Sitting in their new, beautifully decorated dining room, I struggled to find the right words. I started by telling them how proud I was of how they had handled their windfall, how beautifully they had decorated their new home. Then I took a deep breath and asked about the gift to Victoria. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom's fork clinked against her plate as she set it down. Dad cleared his throat multiple times before speaking. They admitted to the gift but insisted it was something they had planned before the lottery win. They said Victoria had been having financial difficulties with her husband's business struggling, and they couldn't bear to see her stressed. When I asked why they hadn't told me, they gave explanations that felt like rehearsed scripts. They said they knew I was doing fine, that I had always been so independent and responsible. They emphasized that they still had plenty of money and that they loved both their daughters equally. They promised they would do something for me too when the right opportunity presented itself. But I knew better. The right opportunity never comes when you're the second choice. The money would continue to flow toward Victoria's needs, wants, and whims, while my independence would be used as an excuse to maintain the status quo. I left that dinner feeling more alone than ever. Over the next several months, I limited my contact with them to necessary interactions. I still attended holidays, for my children's sake, but I no longer confided in them or sought their emotional support. Marcus supported my decision to create distance while maintaining civility for family harmony. As time passed, I heard through extended family members about more gifts to Victoria. There was the luxury car for her birthday, the funded business venture that failed within months, the vacation home in Florida that she used twice before deciding it was too much maintenance. Meanwhile, I received the usual birthday cards with small gift certificates and Christmas presents comparable to what I might give to my children's teachers. Then, last year, the phone call came that would change everything again. It was Victoria, crying hysterically, asking if I could come to the hospital. Mom had collapsed during her morning power walk and was unconscious. Tests revealed she had suffered a brain aneurysm. The doctors were cautiously optimistic but warned that recovery would be long and challenging. Over the next several weeks, I split my time between the hospital and managing my own family. Victoria was present initially, playing the devoted daughter role in front of doctors and visitors. She made grand pronouncements about caring for Mom, about putting her own life on hold. She convinced Dad that Mom needed round-the-clock care in her own home rather than a rehabilitation facility. For the first month, Victoria seemed to embrace her role as primary caregiver. She gave Dad daily updates and posted touching photos on social media of her helping Mom with physical therapy exercises. But as weeks turned into months, and the reality of actual caregiving set in, cracks in her veneer began to show. Physical therapy sessions became inconvenient. Doctor's appointments conflicted with her social calendar. The daily tasks of helping Mom with basic needs suddenly felt beneath her. Her posts gradually shifted from caregiver content to complaints about sacrificing her own life. By month 3, Victoria had essentially disappeared except for 2-hour visits twice a week, usually timed for when I was there to do the actual work. She would arrive with flowers or new pajamas for Mom, take pictures, and leave before any actual caregiving was needed. I found myself staying longer and longer at my parents' house. My therapy practice allowed for some flexibility, and I began seeing my most critical clients virtually when possible. Marcus covered morning routines with our children, and I would head to my parents' house after they left for school. The irony of becoming Mom's primary caregiver wasn't lost on me. One afternoon, about 5 months into Mom's recovery, she had a moment of clarity that cut through the medication-induced fog she often existed in. She grabbed my hand with surprising strength and asked me why I was doing all this. Why wasn't Victoria there more? I wanted to give her the easy answer, to protect her from the truth about her golden child's selfishness. But maybe it was time for honesty. I told her that Victoria had many excuses but that the caregiving was exhausting for her. I didn't elaborate on what we both probably knew, that Victoria had never learned to sacrifice for others because she had never had to. Mom's eyes filled with tears, and she squeezed my hand harder. For just a moment, I thought she might finally acknowledge the disparity between her daughters, might finally apologize for all the years of favoritism. Instead, she closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. As months continued, Dad began suggesting that I move in permanently. He explained that he was overwhelmed trying to manage his business while caring for Mom. He pointed out that my children were now in school full days, that I could work from my parents' house, that Mom needed consistency in her care. The request felt both inevitable and impossible. Part of me wanted to refuse outright, to let him see how absent his precious Victoria had become. But another part of me couldn't abandon my mother, couldn't let her suffer because of old wounds. The woman needed care, and despite everything, I couldn't be the person who denied her that. I discussed it extensively with Marcus and our therapist. We decided I would commit to 6 months of live-in care, with clear boundaries and regular family therapy sessions to process the complex emotions involved. I moved into my childhood bedroom, converting my parents' formal dining room into a home office for my practice. The workload was immense. Beyond managing Mom's physical care, medications, physical therapy, doctor's appointments, meals, I handled household management that Dad couldn't keep up with. Victoria's visits remained minimal and performative. She would sweep in with expensive gifts that seemed more for show than utility, spend an hour chatting about her life, and leave before any difficult care tasks needed attention. 3 months into this arrangement, Dad made a request that triggered my carefully maintained composure. He asked me to take a leave of absence from my practice to care for Mom full-time. He offered to pay me the equivalent of my current salary. The offer, meant as generosity, struck me as the ultimate irony. Now that they needed something from me, suddenly they were willing to recognize the value of my time. I declined the offer but increased my caregiving hours. I couldn't completely abandon my clients who depended on me, but I arranged my schedule to minimize my time away from the house. Victoria, of course, expressed relief that someone was stepping up without offering to increase her own involvement. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late November. I had been awake since 3 a.m. with Mom, who was having trouble sleeping due to medication side effects. My head was pounding, my patience thin. I had just finished breakfast when Dad announced that Victoria was coming over to discuss funeral arrangements. I was confused. Mom was improving, not deteriorating. When Victoria arrived an hour later, she explained her thinking with characteristic self-serving logic. She wanted to pre-plan everything now, while we were all clear-headed and not emotional. She had researched the most exclusive funeral home in the area and had provisional pricing for an elaborate service. As she spoke, laying out plans that seemed more like a social event than a goodbye ceremony, my anger finally reached its tipping point. Every suppressed resentment, every swallowed injustice, every moment of being invisible flooded to the surface. I asked her how she could plan their mother's funeral when she couldn't be bothered to help with her daily care. I pointed out the irony of her wanting to orchestrate an expensive goodbye when she couldn't spare time for simple hellos. I detailed every way I had stepped up while she maintained her distance. Dad tried to intervene, suggesting we all needed to remain calm, but I wasn't done. I turned to him and finally asked the question that had haunted me for years. Why? Why had they always chosen Victoria? Why had her needs always trumped mine? Why, even now, when I was the one sacrificing my life to care for Mom, was Victoria still being protected from criticism? The silence that followed seemed endless. Victoria stood frozen, perhaps hearing her own actions catalogued honestly for the first time. Dad slumped in his chair, aging before my eyes as he faced the pattern he had enabled for decades. The confrontation ended with me packing a bag and calling Marcus to pick me up. I told Dad I needed space, that I would return to help with Mom's care but that I needed to process everything in my own home, with my own family, for a few days. When I returned a week later, the dynamic had shifted. Dad approached me with more humility than I had ever seen from him. He acknowledged what I had done not just in recent months but throughout my life. He admitted to the favoritism and offered explanations about birth order dynamics and personality matches that felt inadequate but at least represented an attempt at honesty. He also revealed something I hadn't known. After my confrontation, he had spoken to Victoria about her lack of involvement. She had responded by demanding more of her inheritance early, claiming that if she had to increase her caregiver responsibilities, she needed financial compensation beyond what they had already given her. The entitlement shocked even him. I established new boundaries for my caregiving. I would help Dad hire professional caregivers for nights and weekends. I would continue managing Mom's medical care and providing companionship during business hours, but I would not sacrifice my own family or career entirely. Victoria's response to these changes was telling. When she learned that her caregiving expectations would increase, she began suggesting various assisted living facilities. When those were rejected, she started hinting about the strain of medical expenses on family finances. Each suggestion revealed her primary concern remained the inheritance she viewed as rightfully hers. Mom's recovery was slow but steady. During one of her more alert periods, she asked me directly about my confrontation with Dad and Victoria. For the first time, I was completely honest about my feelings regarding the favoritism, the lottery money, and the current caregiving situation. She listened quietly, occasionally squeezing my hand. When I finished, she took a shaky breath and said something that changed everything. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry for all of it." It wasn't the dramatic apology scene I had imagined as a child, but it was real and it was enough to begin healing some old wounds. Recovery continued, and after 8 months, Mom regained enough independence to manage with part-time help. Victoria had settled into a pattern of weekly visits that satisfied Dad's desire for family presence without requiring actual caretaking. The facade of family unity was maintained, but the truth of our relationships had been permanently exposed. Dad worked with estate planners to revise their arrangements. While exact details weren't shared, he assured me that lessons had been learned about fair distribution and proper recognition of true devotion versus performative love. Whether this would translate to actual changes remained to be seen. 6 months after Mom's initial collapse, I received a phone call that felt like cosmic justice. It was Victoria, sobbing about a financial crisis. Her husband's law firm was facing major lawsuits, and they were at risk of losing everything. Their assets had been frozen pending investigation, and they couldn't access funds for basic living expenses. She needed immediate help. Her final words before I ended the call were perfectly poetic. "I know you've always come through for family. Please don't let pride get in the way of helping us now." I told her I would do exactly what she had done for Mom. I would visit twice a week, bring occasional gifts, take some pictures for appearance sake, but expect others to handle the heavy lifting. After all, I had learned from the best about how to maintain family relationships without actual sacrifice. The line went silent before she hung up. Whether she understood the lesson I was teaching remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt about setting firm boundaries with Victoria and by extension, with my parents who had enabled her selfishness for so long. Today, Mom continues to improve, though she'll never be exactly who she was before. Victoria's financial troubles worked themselves out after 6 months. She always has a way of landing on her feet, likely with my parents' help once again. Dad seems more aware of the dynamics he created, though old habits die hard. As for me, I've learned that self-respect is more valuable than family approval. I continue to care for Mom because it's the right thing to do, not because I'm seeking validation. I've made peace with being the responsible one, the steady one, the one who sacrifices without expecting recognition. But I've also learned that being that person doesn't mean being invisible or unworthy. It means being strong enough to choose when to step up and when to step back. It means knowing your worth doesn't depend on others' recognition, especially not from those who've consistently shown their priorities. My children now witness me enforcing boundaries respectfully but firmly. They see me caring for their grandmother while maintaining my own identity and family priorities. Most importantly, they're growing up in a home where love is demonstrated through actions, not measured in dollars, and where worth isn't determined by birth order or charm. The lottery money may have illuminated existing family dynamics rather than changing them, but it also gave me the clarity to stop waiting for acknowledgement that would never come. Sometimes the greatest gift isn't inheritance or belated recognition, it's the strength to stop needing either and to create your own legacy of genuine love and respect. I still keep in touch with my parents and sister, but on terms that preserve my dignity and protect my peace. The wounds from childhood favoritism may never fully heal, but they no longer control my present. And perhaps that's the only victory that truly matters in this messy, complicated thing we call family.